views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.
Good day. You are listening to Ability Radio. I'm one of your hosts, Amelia Headley Lamont of the Disability Rights Center of the Virgin Islands. And today we are very happy, privileged to have a dear friend and colleague in the struggle for civil rights. His name is James Harrington. He is a lawyer, a community activist. He was an adjunct professor at the University of Texas at Austin, where he taught constitutional law. He is an author and a priest. His most recent book is entitled The Texas Civil Rights Project: How We Built a Social Justice Movement. Good day, Jim. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you all doing?
Well, we're doing well. We're doing well, considering. One of the
Good.
things, and our audience may recall, we had spoken sometime last year, late last year, just a little teaser about your organizing work. And there were some areas that we wanted to, again, revisit briefly, and then go more into the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, how people can be more, active in their community. You had some really good suggestions about that. So, first of all, tell us about yourself, what I didn't cover, and then we can go into the key points in your book.
Wow. I'm not really big on talking about myself, but my work right now these days is to work with immigrant families and help prepare power of attorney documents in case they get deported so that somebody can take care of their kids.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a great group. It's a totally volunteer group. And as of last Tuesday, we've done powers of attorney for 186 families.
Wow.
So, but that's unfortunately just touching, a very small number of people that are at risk these days with the new immigration enforcement policies.
Right. Now, you started doing community-based work in conjunction with United Farm Workers, and you talked about your initial, introduction to workers in the agricultural field in the state of Michigan. Do you recall having that conversation?
Yeah. So, I started, I spent 7 summers while I was going to school, college, and then grad school, and then law school, working with them farm workers, migrant farm workers who were from the South Texas on the border of the Rio Grande Valley. In Michigan, in the summer, there would be maybe as many as 200,000 people that would migrate from Texas into Michigan to pick berries, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, all kinds of that kind of fruit that Michigan is known for, and cherries. And then the area of the state that I was working, the southwest corner, we had maybe somewhere between 25 to 30,000 people who were living in just abominable conditions, shacks, one-room shacks for a whole family. Electricity was by outside electrical cord. Toilets were outhouses. Water were hoses that people from the growers. It was quite a contrast, because you would then, within just yards, maybe half a football field, you'd have these labor camps, as they were called, maybe 20 shacks, maybe 30, somewhere depending. And then not that far away on the other end would be these really luxurious houses that the farmers, the growers owned. And that contrast was just so startling, as if nobody could see it. These people receiving just abominable, abysmal wages, very, very low wages, barely minimum wage. So that was the kind of work that I did. And that orientated me toward following them to Texas when I got my law degree, and to their homes, because I was really interested in getting and working with them. And at that time, the farm worker movement was really heated in California, going very strong, and most people were going there. But I wanted to go to Texas, where the people were from that I was working with in Michigan. So that's what I did, and I was there 10 years working with farm workers and changing laws and organizing politically until I moved to Austin.
Well,
So it was a great it was a great experience, and it was really wonderful to work with so many terrific people.
now you mentioned before, or and in your book also, I believe, some community organizing strategies. We're now in a world of social media, and how does that transfer to bringing out numbers of people, or what's long term effective? What was your experience with respect
Yeah,
to
so
that?
I think that's a great question, and I think there are a couple parts to this. Let me see if I can encompass them. So the strategy that we used in South Texas to organize farm workers who had never been organized before was to hold house meetings, the kind that Fred Ross picked up from. Fred Ross was the organizer in California
Hmm.
on house meetings and picked up from Saul Alinsky, Industrial Foundation. And we use that to organize the colonias because the colonias were essentially rural ghettos
Hmm.
in South Texas. They're outside of municipalities, and they really have no at that time had very little services. Right, the roads were not paved; they were dirt roads. There was no drinking water. People would bring in water by barrel, which you can imagine
Mm,
was not very healthy.
right.
And for us, it was probably the poorest area and the most long suffering area of the country, just unbelievable. And so the idea was to start organizing in the colonias through these house meetings, which were very effective in each colonia through house meetings. Had selected a committee
Hmm.
that would kind of help guide whatever the house meeting priorities turned out to be. So we had maybe 160 of these Colonia committees that were organized. And then once a year, the farm workers from these representing these committees would get together and have a convention and set their priorities for organizing.
Hmm.
So it was really probably the first time that in the book that I published, there's a few pictures of people at these conventions. And it's what struck me about the pictures is that this is the first time you actually see farm workers sitting down to decide what they want to be doing, what they need to do, as opposed to somebody else telling them.
Mm, right.
And so these house meetings, conventions then set priorities, and the people chose. And what they chose, interestingly enough, I think sometimes folks will say, well, they want to get better wages. But what actually the people chose was workers' comp.
Hmm.
Because in Texas at that time, farm workers were excluded from the law and everybody else, all the other workers were covered. So
Hmm.
if you get hurt on the job, your medical expenses are covered, your time off is covered. If there's a death, and the family has benefits for that.
Hmm.
The law is not particularly good in Texas, of course, typical of all our laws, but it is better than nothing.
Right.
And then you think about this. You have the fact that farm work is the most dangerous occupation in the state, second only to construction.
Hmm.
And sometimes, depending on the season, construction might be number one, but these are the top number two.
Hmm.
And people in construction got workers' comp. They got hurt. But people who were doing farm work did not. And of course, there was a racial divide here, right? The construction workers at that time were all white,
Hmm.
and the farm laborers were Latino.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that became and the other part of this is you think you're already in this extraordinarily poor area of the country, the area least able to sustain people who are injured at work. They would have to depend on their families, churches, their neighbors, people who are already poor.
Right.
And it just wasn't fair, of course. So anyway, we litigated that and we obtained and organized. So there was three prongs to that. One was litigation. That was the role that I had.
Hmm.
And then there was the political organizing, getting people out to vote, meeting with the legislature, and then just the general community organizing that went on to build up popular support. And if, in a couple of years, we were able to change that law. And then the next target was unemployment. Same thing. Farm workers are excluded for unemployment.
Mhm.
So again, to compare it with, construction, construction is very similar. It depends on the season.
Right.
Job ends. They're covered unemployment benefits, but not farm workers. So we went through that struggle and won that victory. And maybe within the first year and a half of those changes, we brought in about $11 million to South Texas, to the valley, as it's called, where people lived.
Uh-huh.
Money that would not have been there, of course, except for changing the laws. And then we did the right to know about pesticides when you're harvesting crops.
Mm-hmm.
You would see growers in their airplanes spraying people while they're working out in the fields.
Right. Right.
Sprayed early in the morning, before the crops would be still wet with the pesticides. And it's important to know about what they're using because it may have health consequences for you.
Of course.
Maybe, if you have some kind of breathing issue, and particularly for women who are pregnant, who are on the fields working. I mean, these chemicals can be very important, very dangerous. And it was important to know which people were using. So we did that. Also, I think a couple other things that we did without having to sue, but through political muscle,
Mm-hmm.
was banning the short-handled hoe. It's a 24-inch hoe that people use to repair the crops left over from slavery.
Mm-hmm.
The idea was if you stood up, you weren't working, and the person in charge would get after you. But think about the consequence of this. If you're stooped over all day, working, what is your back gonna be like when you're 50?
Right.
That kind of stuff. So we succeeded in banning that. And some of this stuff is really unbelievable, but there was no sanitation facilities in the fields. No portable toilet, no drinking water, no washing water. And people get paid by the piece, right? They're not paid by
Right.
the hour. So how many pails of grapefruit do you get? And you get paid by the pail, or you get paid by the sack, that sort of thing. So when somebody, particularly in a situation, the woman had a call of nature, then all the other women would form a circle around her so she would have some privacy.
Right.
That meant nobody got paid at that point, during this exercise of a lack of dignity
Mm-hmm.
that was required.
Let me ask you
So
a quick question. You said something about the hoe. I'm still trying to understand. What you're suggesting is that if somebody's standing up, there's a repercussion. So you had to lobby, you know, whoever to ban that kind of conduct. I want to make sure I
yeah,
understand that.
well, no, it's the size of the hoe. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not the regular hoe.
Mm-hmm.
So the short-handled hoe is 24-inch hoe. So
Ah,
to use that, you have to be bent over all
got
the
it.
time,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, and so there's no reason for it other
Right.
than, controlling people in the field. There's no
Right.
reason for
Gotcha.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's
Gotcha.
the kind of work that we did. But the beauty, to go back to your original question, the beauty of obtaining that power was through the House meetings. Through the House meetings, they were so important because the House meetings, you have maybe 10, 15, 20 people there
Mm-hmm.
having coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an agenda about how to do these meetings. Everybody gets to talk, but maybe it's limited to 2 or 3 minutes at a time.
Right.
And there's a focus, what are the problems we're facing? How do we change it? What do we need to do? What can we do? That kind of 3-step process. And I think that I am that is such one terrific technique
Mm-hmm.
that I've seen it work so well, that's where we need to be these days, is in our resistance to what's going on around us.
Mm-hmm.
we have to organize people. And the fallacy is, I think that, well, we don't have to do the hard work of having these meetings and talking and sorting things out with each other. We can do it on social media. And that's just plain wrong.
Yeah.
Social media can be good for sure, but as a substitute for organizing, it is not. I think what we need to do is to get back to these ideas, this idea of holding house meetings with people, because we have to organize people. So you think about it in social media, is that you're preaching to the choir for all practical purposes,
True.
right?
True.
You're not actually organizing. If people are hearing what they want to hear from you because they want to hear from you, but it doesn't help organize. And think about it. The people who own social media do not want us organized. We saw the 2 trials last week,
Yep.
about how social media is addictive,
Mm-hmm.
how it keeps people glued to the media and not out on the streets. And I am constantly talking about this in all of these book events that I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
that what we need to do is get that house meeting model out there, get people meeting and deciding what they want to do and what can they do, and then to do it.
Right. A coming together, returning to that, because
Absolutely.
I'm seeing that
There is nothing
different.
better. So Willie Velasquez, who organized Southwest Voter Project,
Mm-hmm.
he's now passed away. But he made the point, which I think is absolutely true. He said, if somebody, a Republican, comes to your house and your house is avidly Democrat,
Mm-hmm.
but that Republican asks for your vote, that Republican will get it
Mm,
because he came to your house asking for it.
right.
And I think it's the value of that he's talking about, is the value of that human conduct that we need for organizing.
Mhm.
There's no way to get around it, and I think what Willie said was totally true.
Right. It suggests that they value your opinion, your time, your effort, right? Your respect,
Yeah,
that kind of thing. Right.
totally. Absolutely.
Wow.
And you can see it, if you've ever gone door to door in a campaign,
Mm-hmm.
how often people will thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Even if they're not quite sure what you're talking about, and often that's your agenda, right? Is
Mhm.
that's why you're there.
Right.
But even if they don't quite get it or aren't totally interested, they will say, thank you for coming.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, you know,
Right.
and that is so important. And you don't know, even if you walk away without a commitment, you don't really know that maybe ultimately that person will remember you
Mhm.
and vote.
Right.
It's so important, and I'll tell you,
Mm-hmm.
you can see this in the Super Bowl.
Okay.
If you watch the commercials, you see no commercials about serving the community, strengthening the community, helping each other.
That's true.
What you see are rugged individualism. By this, you'll live forever. By this, you'll be prettier than everybody. By this, you will have more muscles. It's all this individualism that
Right.
goes on,
Right.
that the capitalist system thrives on, has to thrive on. And that reflects, we do the same thing when we play into the social media game without getting out and organizing and talking about community. We allow the people who have the money who don't want us organized.
Well, I thought the Bad Bunny presentation was awesome. I mean, I'm not a football person personally, but I made a point of seeing that, and that was such a powerful presentation.
Yes, and more power to him, because that is exactly what he emphasized was community.
Yes, exactly.
That was, yeah, I mean, more power to him.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
That was his theme, and just celebrating life and supporting each other, was fantastic. And so contrary, as I say,
Mhm.
to what all the commercials are about during the Super Bowl,
Right.
it's but it reflects our culture. And I think the Bad Bunny made us see is that we've got to work on community, strengthen community, you know, and that's what justice is about,
Exactly.
as far as I'm concerned.
I hear you. One of the things I'm not sure our audience knows or remembers, because this is going way back, is your role as activists in promoting the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA is what we call it, getting a campaign going in the Virgin Islands. You came down and in the community, talking to people, rallying our disability community, and we initiated an 8-week litigation campaign. Can you tell us where else you did this or a little bit about that campaign?
I have to say that, altogether we did 550, more or less, ADA cases.
Wow.
And I have to say that the reason we could do so many and the reason we wanted to do so many is working with the disability community, which was already organizing.
Mhm,
Our philosophy was always to work with community groups,
mhm,
because, lawyers can go in. Oh, it's the same thing I talked about with farm workers.
mhm.
We might think, oh, yeah, minimum wage, but what do the people want?
Right.
What are they? So we wanted to always, always work with disability organizations, for a couple of reasons. But one was primary to strengthen them. It's the same role that, playing the Virgin Islands.
Mhm.
How do you support the local organizations so that it becomes more respected, more powerful, and attains its priorities? And that's what we did. And it had really amazing consequences, the disability community. For example, when you go to vote now, and if you're blind, you don't have it, or you have vision issues,
Mhm.
you get one of those earplugs that guides you through the ballot. That's because of the El Paso disability community.
Mm.
Likewise, as you see stadium style theaters being built and have been built,
Right.
wheelchair access is in the middle of the seating so that people, instead, the old days, you'd have to sit down in front of the screen on the floor, right?
Right.
And not only could you not see the entire screen, but also that's where the sound is blasted through the screen at that level. So they got to be the worst seats in the house.
Right.
And so putting them in the middle, wheelchair seating in the middle of the stadium is, giving people comparable view and putting their companion seating next to them. Our plaintiff in that case, or one of our witnesses in that case, was a grandmother who had talked about going to watch a movie, and she had to be down in front of the screen. She wanted to go with her granddaughter.
Mm.
So, but her granddaughter, young kid, just didn't like it, and she went up and sat in the middle of the theater. But it sort of undercut that whole granddaughter grandma experience, because these folks who were building theaters weren't complying to the law.
Right.
But that again comes out of Disability Volar in El Paso disability organization. So that's what we tried. And it's not just physical access, but what about people that are coming out on parole who have mental disabilities,
Mhm.
coming out of jail, out of prison? How do you work with them? And the way we changed that is that the parole officer basically became a social worker, helping that person connect to Social Security benefits, helping that person understand how to get around on the bus, how to, and also knew how to deal with that person if that person acted out,
Mhm.
instead of just revoking their parole and sending them back to prison, but learn how to work with them, when there was some acting out that went on. And that's all, again, I mean, it's all from the disability community, the priorities and stuff that people set. It was such a pleasure. It was fun going. And you all were very creative in the Virgin Islands in your 8-week campaign.
It was fun.
You had poetry. You even had poetry.
That's right.
You know, it was very
Recreating
creative.
scenes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And but that was always a good approach. We did as you all did, on the different parts of Texas, different cities,
Mm-hmm.
these commemorative ADA events on the anniversary of the ADA, and have a different theme. Like one year, we might have talked about restaurants, perhaps. Maybe another year, we talked about the lack of interpreters in medical facilities, and just, or entertainment venues. The list is long. Or access to gas pumps.
Mm,
So we have different themes all the time, but it was good. And the disability community picked the theme.
right.
What was on their mind, this year for the ADA campaign. So what we did what you all did in Virgin Islands is something.
Well, it was a wonderful experience and something that we hope to, address at some point. We have just a minute left. And what I want our audience to be mindful of is that you wrote a book, and it is called The Texas Civil Rights Project: How We Built a Social Justice Movement. Its author is James Harrington. Where can they get the book?
So you can get it on Bookshop. I always recommend Bookshop over Amazon.
Hmm.
Barnes and Noble has it for sale too.
Okay.
And you can order it directly from UT Press. And the prices are all about the same. None are better than the others at this point.
Okay.
I have to say the book will be coming out in paperback in a few months,
Okay.
and it will be coming out in Spanish.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for your input. And we will revisit your history and our history, our collective history. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a wonderful show, Disability Rights, Ability Radio. Thank you so much and have a good day. Bye-bye.
The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.